Welcome to this SPDN. It's wonderful to see that you're all very active there in your different locations. So a warm welcome to everyone in Matlock. First of all, hi everyone there. Give us a little wave. A warm welcome to everyone in London at the London Metropolitan University there with Catherine. Welcome, and a warm welcome to all of you guys in Worcester. Good morning, great to see you. Welcome to everybody who's there with Lois and Preston at UCLan, doing the Mexican wave there. Perfect, it's wonderful to see you all as well. And a very warm welcome to everybody who's joining us from Banska Bystrica in the Slovak Republic there. Good morning, hope you're all well. And we also have our friends in Athens, Greece with us. Good morning. We can't see you just now, so whenever you have the chance, come off, switch on your cameras. We've seen you earlier. It would be wonderful to see you all there as well, joining us there. As you can see, we're running this event across 6 different locations all at the same time. So thank you so much for joining and for being one of those locations. It's been an amazing effort with our co-hosts kind of organizing and co-designing the entire event to dedicate some time on storytelling and how we can use story in social pedagogical or relational practice, no matter in which context you might be working. So as you might know, storytelling itself is a very, very ancient tradition. As human beings, we've told stories, listened to stories since civilization, since the dawn of civilization, basically. And it's enabled us to connect at a human-to-human level and to pass on insights, to ask ourselves questions and explore new opportunities. And just have a lot of fun there. As you said, like in the Menti there, the thing that happens when we share stories, when we create stories, when we listen to stories is that we're connecting, we're happy, we share empathy, we can share love, we can feel that sense of love for the things that are important to us or that are important to other people. We have that sense of happiness, of hope is one other thing that I'm just picking up there. So all of these are really important emotions that we want people to feel when we work with them in a professional context as well. So that's why stories are really important in relational practice, and why they are important and how we can do that in practice, how we can embed more creative storytelling methods in practice is something that we're here to find out today. So I'm really delighted that you're there for that. As I said, we have a whole range of different inputs about storytelling, and we have a range of practical methods that you can try out in your own location. And we have a whole list of other practical methods that we'll send you after the event so that you can find a whole range of methods that might suit your context, your practice context. And if you have any more, then you can add to that document as well. So first of all, I would like to introduce you to a video created by a group of social pedagogy students in Athens. So Georgia, Alexandra, Vicky, Marianti, and Penny have been working very, very actively, both behind and in front of the scenes over the last few months. And we're really delighted that they were so eager to contribute with their ideas, because storytelling is a very big thing in Greece. And they were even willing to record a little video to share their insights about storytelling.
Upon a time, in a village far away from here, there were 2 men who shared the same passion for nature. The first one was a gardener, known for his attention to detail. His garden was always well kept, full of flowers and plants that he had carefully chosen himself. It was enclosed by a fence, and each plant was placed exactly where he had decided, thriving under his tender care. Passersby admired the beauty and symmetry that the gardener had created. However, he was constantly busy. He had to water the plants, prune them, protect them from pests, and decide what to plant in each season. The well-being of the garden depended solely on him. If he stopped working, even for a short time, the plants would wither quickly. On the other hand, the forest ranger seemed to have a much more relaxed role. He roamed through his forest and rarely showed any concern about the vegetation. Unlike the garden, the forest was not enclosed, nor was it shaped by human intervention. The trees, shrubs, and plants grew freely, some by chance and others because they had withstood difficult circumstances. The vegetation was rich, diverse, and full of life, and did not need human intervention to survive. The forest ranger wasn't the one to decide what would bloom or what would survive. His role was to facilitate the natural evolution of the forest. He would clear paths, prune trees to help them withstand strong winds and prevent them from overshadowing their neighbors, as he promoted natural balance. Despite its seeming simplicity, the forest was resilient. Even if he were to leave one day, the forest would continue to live and grow. The trees and plants didn't rely on him because they knew how to find resources they need on their own, taking in the sunlighting, absorbing water and nutrition from the soil. Self-sufficiency was the forest's greatest strength. One day the village faced a long drought. The garden began to suffer. Despite the gardener's best efforts, the plants couldn't endure the harsh conditions. The garden had chosen plants that required constant care and plenty of water, and without these they started to wilt. No matter how hard he worked, the garden slowly lost its beauty. In the forest, however, the drought was just another cycle of nature. The plants and trees had learned to survive with less water, with their roots stretching deep to find hidden resources. Although the forest ranger offered a few small interventions, the forest continued to grow, adapt, and live despite the adversity. Eventually, the drought ended. The garden was destroyed and needed to be redesigned from scratch. In contrast, the forest had endured the trial. With the first rain, new life began to sprout again, filling the forest with life. The lesson for the village was clear. The true strength does not lie in absolute control and perfect organization, but in the ability to let things grow and survive on their own, with resilience and wisdom, just like the forest does.
Hopefully, somewhere in this story you saw yourselves. The creation, narration, and editing of stories is an ancient practice that resonates across cultures, aligning with human nature and serving as a means to preserve both individual and collective memory. This universal experience allows people to engage emotionally with information, facilitating a deeper understanding of complex ideas, values, and social behaviors. Stories not only enhance memory, but also provide a framework for processing and interpreting situations, thereby aiding in predictions and the exploration of intricate issues. Through storytelling, individuals can discuss sensitive topics in a non confrontational manner, creating a safe space for dialogue. The collaborative aspect of storytelling fosters the development of problem solving strategies, particularly in sociopedagogical contexts, leading to improved outcomes. The various forms of storytelling, such as short stories, anecdotes, legends, fairy tales, scripts, and interactive narratives, have applications in diverse fields, including art, education, literature, folklore, communication sciences, information and communication technologies, learning organizations, management, and of course, social pedagogy. This versatility illustrates how storytelling can be tailored to specific contexts and goals. In social pedagogy programs, the collaborative creation and processing of stories enables participants to reflect on how individual and collective memory influences their worldview. The reimagining of reality through storytelling fosters transformative learning experiences that can shift attitudes, behaviors, and social structures. Furthermore, incorporating different art forms such as visual arts, theatre, and music enriches the sociopedagogical approach. By combining various media, participants engage more deeply with social issues, encouraging critical dialogue and prompting them to reconsider their perceptions. Bell emphasizes the pedagogical potential of storytelling, suggesting that it can help individuals decompress and dismantle preconceived notions about various issues. This approach highlights storytelling as a timeless educational tool, valuable for both children and adults. Through their symbolic content, stories provide direct access to diverse ideas, knowledge, perceptions, relationships, and behaviors, thereby familiarizing individuals with different aspects of life. The myriad variations of storytelling techniques allow for flexibility in addressing the specific goals of programs and the appropriateness of context. Participants in these programs gain insight into how their individual and collective memories shape their thoughts. By redefining and modifying often unspoken prejudice and stereotypes, emergent stories foster new understandings and perspectives. The simultaneous use of multiple artistic forms enables a more nuanced approach to critical aspects of sociopedagogical issues. This multidimensional platform facilitates dialogue, critical reflection, and the resignification of personal and group perceptions, attitudes, and behavior. Such transformation is crucial for effectively addressing the examined problems within these contexts. Social neuroscience offers an alternative perspective on the matter through experiments conducted by Yuri Hasson. His research demonstrates that storytelling fosters a deep neural connection between speakers and listeners as their brains synchronize during the process. This shared brain activity enhances mutual understanding and emotional connection. Hasson's findings suggest that storytelling can stimulate empathy and critical thinking, making it a powerful tool in social pedagogy for addressing and comprehending complex social issues. In conclusion, storytelling serves as a vital means of education and communication, bridging personal experiences with collective realities. It is an ancient cultural practice that enhances critical reflection, emotional understanding, and social change. Through the creation, narration, and analysis of stories, individuals in social pedagogy programs are encouraged to engage with complex topics, challenge stereotypes, and envision a more inclusive society. This process fosters personal growth and collective learning while preserving culture and cultivating a shared sense of identity. Ultimately, storytelling becomes an invaluable tool for both individual development and social transformation.
There we go. Thank you very much, Georgia and Alexandra in particular for recording that video. It's really inspiring and really insightful, I would say, and I want to give you all the opportunity to share what might have resonated with yourselves from that video. Okay, so we can go back on Menti, and I will just bring that up as well. And the question I would like you to think about is, what's something that occurred to you whilst you were listening? You might remember that Georgia was talking about the story of the gardener and the forester, and Alexandra made that point that somewhere in this story you might have found yourself somewhere. And that's the thing about great stories. They enable us to find ourselves in them somewhere. I think the other thing that stands out for me from this is very much that the value lies not just in the real stories, inviting people to share their own stories, but actually also in coming up with imagined stories that just enable us to think about what is going on for us in those different stories, and to form empathy and connection by telling stories. So I want to come to Angela and Carla there in Worcester to just get a little bit of feedback about that video. Anything that stood out for yourselves there, Angela and Carla? I'll just invite you to come off mute there. And as you can see, there's already quite a few people there adding to the Menti.
Is that Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. I just made a couple of notes of things that occurred to me while I was listening to that. I thought it really showed the power of metaphor. So that's metaphor is really a really good way of getting a message across really meaningfully through a story. It seems very powerful, and I thought that the link to neuroscience was really interesting. Yeah, I think I'm going to look at that in more detail later on, because it's really good to hear that, you know, there is scientific proof of the power of stories. And really, the story was very relevant to most of us, a lot of us in the room are working with children and young people, and it was really relevant because it's about facilitating children and young people's learning rather than, you know, giving too much structure. So facilitating their learning and allowing children to develop and thrive, you know, without us. So it's quite a powerful story for us, I thought. You want to say anything else? No. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks. And we've already got quite a few responses there as well. Feel free to keep them coming. Whilst I've ended the screen share just now, it doesn't mean that you can't still contribute to that. What I would like to introduce you next is a short video on storytelling for systems change. This was recorded by Rosie McIntosh, who was the Global Director for Storytelling at the Center for Public Impact. So you can see that some of the big think tanks in the UK have people very much devoted to better understanding the power of storytelling and how we can elicit that in order to create change in people's lives and communities and more broadly within societies. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Rosie.
Hello, how are you? My name is Rosie. It's great to be here with you today. I hope you're all having a good day so far. Just to let you know, I am Rosie McIntosh. I've been working with stories for 2 decades, and that's included working with individuals, with communities, with charities to help them to use stories to achieve the aims in their work. I was the Global Director of Storytelling and Communications at the Centre for Public Impact, and I was the Chief Executive of Mindwaves, which is a peer-led storytelling charity about mental health, and I am now on their board, so involved with lots of this kind of work. And I can give you a little bit of an update of the ways that we've used stories and maybe give you some things to think about in your own work. So I really like the way that Ella Saltmarsh divides up thinking about stories. So she wrote this great article, which is linked right here, and she published it in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. And she divides up thinking about the functions of stories as light, stories as glue, and stories as web. Now, obviously, these things all interact with each other, and there's never a time when they do just one thing, but I find it a really helpful structure. So first of all, stories can function as light, and I think this is one of the ways that we think about them most often. So they can help us to understand. We can understand ourselves, we can understand others, we can understand systems. They can help us to see what the problem is, and they can maybe help us find a way towards a solution. They show up the cracks and they help us to find a way forward. So when we think about using a story to do that, often maybe we think about sort of consultation or getting people to fill in forms, but there's something about when you listen to something as an actual story that it makes people reveal more, and we can learn something that's more meaningful. So I always think, like, what is it that makes that person feel safe and comfortable to share? An example that I've done in the past is when I did my dissertation, I cooked with the women who I worked with, and they gave us information in that way that I don't think they would have in a sort of face-to-face interview. When I worked at CPI, we had released a report called Listening to Understand, which has quite in-depth stuff about how we can get better at listening to stories and not just on the sort of supply side of things. And I've got a little story here from a guy called Tommy Whitelaw, who's based in Scotland and I've known for many years and who appeared on the CPI podcast. Here's Tommy.
We live in such a fast pace now that we're listening with a first intent to reply as opposed to a first intention to listen. So there's a great study in primary care, and this was to break it down from not just listening to people, individuals, families, but across our workspaces. And they found it in these really busy environments that people interrupted between 12 and 18 seconds. And they found that the professional did about 80-something% of the speaking. So there's lots of reasons for that. If I'm really busy and I do all the speaking, I'm deciding how long this conversation lasts. But what they did was they said to them, right, next week, as we follow this big piece of work, when you say to someone, how can I help you today? Or, why have you come in today? Whatever that question may be, you can't speak again until the person you've asked stops speaking. And people only spoke on average between 30 and 90 seconds. And the problem with that again is, imagine you're trying every day to tell someone in your life, your work, your space, how you feel inside, and they keep interrupting you. And you have to keep carrying that 30 to 90 seconds with you. Maybe that's how we meet so many people feeling at crisis.
So that's Tommy. I think that's a real insight. I think that taking the time to sit and actually just listen to people is so valuable. If you're interested in that, if you want to hear more, you can listen to the Reimagining Government podcast. There's a full episode. We've got examples from Scotland, from Indonesia, and a big conversation around it. So the next part of this is this idea of stories as glue. And that's the part where we think about the way that we use stories to connect with people, to build empathy, and to build relationships. And often it's when we sit down together, we talk about our stories, we share our hopes and our dreams, that it reminds us of what our values are and our goals, and it helps us to work together towards a shared mission. So the example I'm going to use for this one is the charity Mindwaves that I have worked with for many, many years. It is a very happy space to be in. And the whole idea behind that is that we bring people together to share their stories, their experiences, and their opinions. And we use that for several reasons. The first is that people tell us that there's a therapeutic benefit of coming together and sharing their stories and maybe rethinking what their stories are. The second is that it builds a real connection between people and gives, because it's all peer-led, it creates those really strong relationships. But the third part of that is it's not just relationships for the sake of it. It's when people come together that they feel that they have the strength to be able to take collective action and to share their collective stories and to change things in the world. And we know that this is true from the research around climate change as well. People often feel very hopeless and report having climate anxiety. And taking individual actions like recycling and things don't seem to have much impact on that. But when people come together with other people, share their thoughts, feelings and dreams and feel that they're taking collective action, that has a real benefit on mental health and also means that we have the strength to actually make the changes that we want to see in the world. And that's what leads us on to this idea of stories as web. I think this one is possibly the most difficult for me to get my head around. And I think the idea is that the stories can function as a web. So we can tell lots of individual stories. We can listen to lots of individual stories. We can understand where the points are that stories repeat themselves. And in the same way, the sort of web within a sort of neural network, the ones that fire over and over again become clear, we see the points that are the most often. And we realise that we also live within a story. But the narratives that underpin our thinking are the framework that inform how we behave. So if we can tell stories, connect on stories and change the wider story, then that's the best way for us to shift the system. So a nice example of this was a project that I worked on with Glasgow Association for Mental Health, NHS, and the Glasgow City Health and Social Care Partnership. And they wanted to change the way that professionals responded to people after they've been bereaved by suicide. And as we all know, suicide is a particularly difficult topic. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to hear about it. And many people after they're bereaved, when they deal with professionals, they find that they had a really poor response. So what we did was we brought people together to share their stories. Now, this is very much a light and glue and web project, because we learned a lot from talking to people. They shared their experiences about bad experiences and also the things that could have been done better. Those people connected in a really meaningful way, and many people who were part of that told us that they didn't realise that anybody else had been through the same as them, and it was quite life-changing for them. But the other thing that we did was we used those stories, we created short animations, and these are all linked here. There's a link in there if you want to look at them, using audio to create collective stories that were used as part of a training programme for the people who work with people after they've been bereaved by suicide. So not just police and ambulance people, but right down to the people who work in a bank and might need to understand more about that very complicated experience. So the aim of that then is to use stories to change that narrative and to change how mindsets are operating. So what I would advise then is, maybe if you think about in your own work, if you can think of an example of where stories and storytelling and story listening might have acted as light and glue and web. And as I said at the start, of course, they're never just one. You can probably think of examples of where they're operating all those different ways. But it might help to sit and think about an example and think about where it was behaving in those three separate ways. Thank you so much. I hope the rest of your day goes well. If anybody wants to get in touch, I am available on X or Twitter, which I don't use so much anymore, at Rosie Hopes, but you're also welcome to drop me an email, rosie@mindwavesnews.com, if there's anything that you'd like to talk about.
So that was Rosie's insights into stories as light, stories as glue, and stories as web. And I'd like to invite you to think about your own practice now. And if you are using story in your own practice, are you using it in any of these ways? Are you using it as light, glue, web, or are you actually not often using it in any of those ways? Okay, so you should have a little sort of dial to determine for yourself to what extent are you using stories as light, glue, or web. And we can then see how that all changes here. In the meantime, I would like to just come to Simon over in Derbyshire and tell us a little bit about your reflections on this video.
Hi everyone, hope your days are going as well as ours. It's a really interesting video from Rosie. I've watched it about 3 times now, and something new occurs to me every time. I think we definitely need to think about the thing that Tommy was saying in his little clip, that idea of giving people that 90 seconds, speaking last maybe in our conversations. We don't want to be the professional who's managing the time for everyone we speak to. And this idea of light, glue and web, I was pondering on the fact that maybe some of us think of ourselves as just our stories. You know, I certainly think, what am I other than the stories I am? But maybe this is about that sense of, and I've certainly thought about stories in terms of learning, I've sort of stories in terms of gluing people together, but this idea of web and how actually maybe like a collective unconsciousness that Jung would talk about, this idea of our stories becoming the societies, the culture that we create, and actually how we influence and change that then requires us to understand the stories we tell, the stories we hear, and find time to develop those stories. We often talk in Derbyshire about our story of how social pedagogy has evolved in our practice. And there are different tales, different chapters of that story as we've gone. We're hoping to continue to write that book.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you all for your contributions via Menti as well. It should still be up for a couple more moments, so feel free to contribute. In the meantime, we'd like to double down on some of the things that Tommy said there, and it connects really nicely with that next video by Jasnath Richards from London Metropolitan University on what might help people to be the narrator of their own story. So I'll invite you to join me for that.
My name's Jasmine Richards, and I am a person with lived experience who has had experience being in the care system. So I really want to speak about the importance of being the narrator of your own story. I think I've had the opportunity of doing so by going around and sharing parts of my lived experience, and that has really helped me to be a great narrator. But as I reflect back on my experience in care, I have found it to be of the utmost importance of being able to be listened to when it comes to things like my desires, my goals, my dreams, my requests, my likes, my dislikes, and things of that nature. And one thing I thought was quite important, or has been like a mantra for my life, is to be quick to listen and slow to speak, which helps people to feel like they're being understood. And I think examples of that were definitely times spent in my children's home, where I would have like meetings with my key workers, and they would listen to the desires of my heart, such as I really wanted to sing and dance, and it sounds very funny, but I ended up getting an audition for Sylvia Young and didn't even go. But the mere fact of the matter is that I felt heard. I was also invited to a studio to sing because I really enjoyed singing, and that really showed me that my key workers were really taking things, taking what I was saying and putting them on board. Now obviously there are some things that you might desire and might want to have, but it's not possible for that to be so because of restrictions or regulations or, you know, principles and things of that nature. However, I think that it was really important that my key workers would actually explain to me why these things couldn't happen, but to show me that they had tried. So, you know, for example, I've gone to your social worker and I've told her your desires and your wishes and your wants. However, we can do this, but we can't do that. And I think that that's been quite some of the positives that I've had within being a looked after child and things like that. I think that it's really important for you to listen to understand rather than to respond, and that has also been something that I personally have been challenged with when it comes to my own children, practicing the art of, you know, understanding what they're saying much rather than just wanting to just respond. And sometimes not responding at all is actually the art of listening. It's just listening to what the person has to say, and then if they ask for your feedback, then acknowledging what's been said. But sometimes people just need a listening ear, and I think that that has helped me to be a narrator of my story, because it hasn't closed my mouth, but it's enabled me to open my mouth to share the things that I want to say. So yeah.
Perfect. So that was Jasneth with her experience and her contribution, and why, from the perspective of the people we support, it is important that we listen to understand rather than listen to respond. Of course, we're not suggesting that that's an easy thing to do or that it comes necessarily naturally to us. It's certainly something that we can practice, as Jasneth mentioned there as well. And so I'll invite you to think about what kind of listening comes most natural to you. So if you go to Menti, again, you can sort of move between listening to respond on the left side and all the way to listening to understand. In the meantime, whilst you're doing that, I'll invite Lois at Preston there for any thoughts from your side on this video.
Yeah, lots of thoughts. For me, I think Jasneth's presentation kind of sums up the other two. So what she's talking about there is that, what did she say? I love that phrase. When she said, quick to listen, be quick to listen and slow to speak. And that actually she showed that when you do that, you feel connected, which links back to the video that Alexandra and everybody did in Greece, which is in Athens, talking about that neuroscience, that we feel connected as human beings. And so Jasneth there is saying that's what she felt. So I thought that was a really important message. And then the other one was that being able to listen to understand, which again links to the Rosie's video and the message that Tommy said about actually stopping and listening and not speaking. So, and the fact that we interrupt people and we do most of the talking as professionals in people's lives. I think again, Jessneth she's really highlighted the importance of making sure that you stop and listen to people. So yeah, lots and lots of connections, and it's about meeting people on that human level. So yeah, really interesting. And also in you know, what kind of listening comes naturally to you? I think it depends, to use a real social pedagogical phrase.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can see that there's a fair few of you that are kind of in the middle, but gravitating towards that listening to understand. So it's always a helpful thing to kind of just sort of mentally check in, how am I listening in different situations. So Alexandra and Co in Athens there, I'd like to invite you as well to any kind of responses, anything that stood out for you from all these videos, anything that can really connect it.
So yes, we'll try to sum everything up a bit. Starting from our input, to create the input, we brainstormed a bit in order to find a time in our practice that a story made us connect and inspired us. And many of us had the thought of mentioning a story from our classes in our social pedagogy masters that for us represents the difference between a traditional teacher and a social pedagogist that tries to inspire students. And I think it can be applied to social work in general, not just education. And we tried to explain why that happened, and hopefully we made you understand that from your own experiences. Then on the second video, we saw that stories are a powerful tool of connection and empowering. And we as social educators, we can use that in our everyday practice. Especially at the presentation of Rosie, I think we saw a very powerful metaphor for what different types of stories can be, how different types of stories can be used in our practice. And the categorization of blue, web, and light, I think, is very helpful to make us understand and I don't know, like deepen a bit on the subject. That's from me.
And one last comment that we have for Jasmine Richard's talk. Active listening is, of course, a very like a key principle in social pedagogy, but it really is applicable in all our interactions and relationships with people in our everyday life. And it really makes you wonder sometimes. You may interact with the same people over and over again, every day even, but how well do you actually know them, even if you're discussing with them? So active listening is really the key here. Some food for thought, yeah. That's it from us.
Perfect. Thank you so much for those reflections. I will now hand you all back to your local hosts for a bit of a break and then some activities that get you to practically get into storytelling and the power of story. So have a great time with that, and we will come back here in about an hour's time for just some final feedback and reflections from all of you. So I'll see you then. Whilst we're waiting for everybody to kind of get back with their activities, I think you're all done. So that is brilliant. Fantastic. I would like to invite each location to just share very briefly one thing that you're taking away from your conversations, maybe one insight you gained from the conversations you had. And I'll come to Lois first in Preston, and then I'll come to Simon in Derbyshire, and then to Worcester and then to Athens, and then to Slovakia, and finally to London. Okay, so over to you, Lois.
Okay. Hopefully you can hear. Go on then.
We just said that one of the things we found was that we all have our own stories and our own chapters, and it's okay to change our chapters and stories along our life journey.
Did you hear that?
Yes, wonderful. It's okay to change our chapters. We're in charge of our own stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Stories and change.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Simon, can we come to you guys in Matlock, Derbyshire?
Hi all, hope your mornings have been great. I did try and persuade somebody else in the room to talk rather than me, but then got shouted to the front. We've had a great time telling stories, interesting mix of people from both within Derbyshire and external, conversations that didn't allow much space. There wasn't much silence because stories were being told, but I think it's enabled us to frame those stories. And I think for me, it's a sense of finding the time to listen and finding the time when it's right to tell. And then the stories help us change. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Simon, and everybody there in Matlock. Thanks. Carla and Angela in Worcester, can we come to you next? What's one takeaway from your side?
Oh,
Sorry, we just put her on the spot.
from the last activity.
Just from any of them, really, yeah. Just a takeaway. So a takeaway from the whole thing.
The whole day's been really wonderful. It's been wonderful having different methods of sharing stories. So on the table, seeing everybody's objects and the personal connections and the glue in between that was kind of linking people together, and stories over cake and sharing that, and then opportunities to do the kind of the Googling approach as well. And we were just finding lots of different kind of connections, and a big theme for us was this idea of reciprocity. So ideas of reciprocity and kind of stories as sort of gift exchange, and when working with people, that idea that we're both kind of bringing a gift and sharing that together. So looking at that was a theme that stood out for me. Would anyone else like to?
That's wonderful.
That's
Share?
brilliant.
That's brilliant, Maggie. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is great feedback there. And Georgia and colleagues there at Velos Youth in Greece, can we come to you next?
Okay.
Hello.
Hi. So actually, we felt through the process that we connected to each other, even if we did know them or not. We actually got to know each other and feel like we developed some similarities and find our common views or even our differences. And actually, that made us better people, because we see if we clicked with people, and actually we didn't remain in our brains and our micro worlds, but to the whole world. And we actually could develop as characters, because I feel like storytelling is actually that's the purpose, to see your experiences, share your experiences, share your points of views, and actually try to change the whole world. So yeah, that's basically it.
Thank you so much for that. That's great to hear. And can we come to Milada and Miriam and Mario at Banska Bystrica for the next feedback. In the meantime, I will also just change the slide, so all of you who have been adding your responses to examples of how you're using storytelling in your practice, what we'd like you to think about as well and start adding is what's something you'll be taking away from the event. First of all, we want to hear from our Slovak colleagues about their conversation. What's something you're taking away?
Hello, Zuzka. My name is Miriam. Zuzka is a spokesperson of our group, and we'll say the conclusion of our activities.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Zuzana, and we all together warming review from Slovakia. First of all, I would like to tell you that we really have enjoyed the last activity as well as the whole event. It has been very enriched for us. Now, let me briefly summarize what we have been working on. Firstly, we have chosen the topic or activity number 3, positive and negative listening. We have worked in small groups. At the beginning of activity, we have shared our own personal experiences with negative and positive listening. After it, we discussed about each phenomena in more details, and at the end, we made a flip chart with the main points to came to the following. People who are actively listened by the others feel respectful, more understood, and they even feel more care by the others. On the other hand, people or those who have negative experience or have experience with negative listening feel more misunderstood, there is a lack of interest, and even they may feel irritated or frustrated. So in conclusion, we can add that a combination of unconditional listening with unconditional acceptance seems to be more effective in the approach of positive or active listening. So I think that would be all from us. Thank you for being a part of this event and have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you too. That's all great to hear. And last but by no means least, can we come to Catherine and friends in London? What's something you're taking away?
Correct. Oh, hang on. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Can you hear us?
We can hear you all right.
Okay. Lots of different ideas came up. There was lots about the listening and not checking ourselves and how good we are at listening or how quick we are to respond. An idea came up for me, which was around glue and thinking about stories that bind people together. But sometimes stories can also maybe are not transformative. Maybe stories can make us stick to the status quo or reinforce unhelpful ways of being. And this also came up in our conversation about recent events here in the UK, where viral stories spread that basically led to racist pogroms, so stories, and that also makes me think about platforms. Who gets the platform to tell a story? Whose stories get heard? Whose stories get repeated and reinforced and taken up? And whose stories get ignored or left in the sidelines? And so issues of power came into storytelling too.
Those are amazing points. Yeah, absolutely. And I think for better or worse, often we see that stories can cause this wider social disruption. So that's a really good point to also think about whose stories are we listening to, paying attention to, which stories might we need to amplify in order to promote our wider aim of social justice. So thank you very much for all your contribution. It sounds like you've all had a brilliant event. We will be sharing details about everything with yourselves as well. And I would like to just say a huge thank you to everybody who's hosted an event. Also a huge thank you to our friends in Athens for their video. Thank you to Rosie for her video, and thanks to Jasnath for contributing with her video as well. It was lovely to meet you. I'll hand you back over to your local hosts for the final words, and hopefully see you again at a future SPDN event. Take care.